Voted. Discussion or possible action, item A, transit ridership report. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good.
Right, so,
Hey, and ridership's up.
Yep.
All right.
Let's see. Do you have any questions on the report?
Anybody? Any questions? I'm happy to see that it ticked up a bit. Maybe it's the holiday season travels, huh? Okay, seeing, I guess we don't have any questions for you this time.
Okay.
Just happy to see it go up.
Same here.
Thank you. Move on to action item B, or discussion and action item, facilities quarterly reports. Hello, Kara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Good, I'm good. So I'm just going to point out a couple of things here on this report. So on our first page here, our change management program, which is really what we're calling our communication program with the employees in the buildings. We've been working on making some changes to be consistent in how we're communicating emergencies, projects, and just general routine updates, which we have to do quite a bit. We've narrowed down kind of the formats that we're going to be using going forward, and we're just in the documentation stage of that now. So that's scheduled to end by the end of the year, and I don't anticipate that there's going to be any challenges with that. The next topic is still under consideration that I don't have any specific updates on the improvement of our key performance indicator. At this point, we're still identifying what projects we're going to work on that would impact that. And that score is based off of surveys and our documented reporting from our building management or our work order management system, and making improvements in speed of delivery, accuracy, and customer service. The next open goal is campus master plan, and I note that the due date says 12/29/23. That was the original due date. As changes have occurred in the county, I've added targets added tasks to that particular goal. The date didn't update there, but I've had that updated this afternoon. So it now is going out into 2026 at this point. Some of the things that have been added are, I heard you talking about some of the expansion projects that were consolidation projects really here is what we're doing with some construction. We've also had some significant project work associated with the Samaritan and the UW campus as well. So those are topics that have been added to this particular goal, and our building systems, our building automation system, card access system, fire system are all in need of upgrade, and that's part of our master plan. So we're incorporating that as well. So those have all been added. I think 26 is realistic at this point. If future things come on that get added, that date might continue to change.
Understood. Mm-hmm. Are we done with all the Samaritan updates and stuff that were?
I have nothing remaining open at Samaritan.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then the final one, that our standard operating procedures, that's been a combination of documenting procedures that we didn't actually have written down, as well as updating ones that we did and making sure that they're fresh and accurate. And that's involved our whole team. Every single one of our employees down to our part-time custodians have been involved in this. And we completed what we set out to do in 2024. And now we're prioritizing our next round of procedures that will be attacked in 2025. Awesome. Any questions I can answer?
That was just what I was going to say. Anybody have any questions? Seeing none, I guess we're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item C, shared ride taxi reduction in hours operation. Mr. Scott, oh, you're taking that over. It does say Scott on here, though.
Oh, okay. Yep. So the Washington County Shared Ride Taxi currently operates 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Let's see. Oh, so the first time was Monday through Saturday, 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. In that ridership report you saw earlier, ridership is very low at the end of the day. So we've been looking at the ridership, evaluating it during that time, and we've been working with our provider on how we can reduce the hours on Monday through Friday, but keep the same hours on Sunday. It's kind of consistent ridership on Sunday. So I've included in the attachments or exhibits A, B, and C the data to support this change in the schedule. So let's see. So I'm not on the exhibits yet, but in the agenda it mentions that there were 192 serviceable weekdays, and 162 of those 192 days had no trips after 9 p.m. And as far as Saturday, there were 38 operable Saturdays, and 26 of them had no trips after 8:30 p.m. So there's not many, or if at all, trips during these time periods. So
I'm sorry, go ahead, Scott.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, let me just tee this up a little bit more for you before Charlie gets really deep in the numbers for you. And of course, the exhibits are all in your pack, and we'll have them up on the screen as well. What we did was this committee has been seeing their ridership reports for quite some time. Even the committee before this one was seeing those ridership reports. And what we're looking at doing is to streamline our service a little bit. When we say reducing the hours, that means if we drop the hours off at the end of the day, that it's not reducing the whole service. I'm cutting in and out, huh?
Speakers are.
Okay. And so what we're looking at doing is taking that, instead of that driver staying till 10 p.m. at night, that driver then would be there during the day, during our peak times, right? So we're not reducing our overall service hours. We'll still be buying or purchasing 58,000 purchasing hours from our vendor. It would just be that we would have them service different hours during the day and what we feel are better hours and more productive hours during the day. But Charlie's certainly going to run through some of the detailed numbers for you to figure out how he came up with the exact why we're looking at those hour changes there. Thank you.
yes, that's right. It would still be the same build hours. It would just be moving it towards peak time, the drivers. Let's see. So Exhibit A, that's the report you normally see each month. As you can see, the ridership is very low, around 8 and 9 p.m., and that's by day of the week and time of day. Let's see. Exhibit B.
I think I hear you in some of the
okay.
speakers, but
Okay.
not all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Just go ahead, John.
Okay. Let's see. Exhibit B, it's the same table from the agenda. It's the current and proposed hours, what the change would look like, changing Monday through Friday, closing instead at 10 p.m. at 9 p.m., and closing instead at 10 p.m. on Saturday, to then close at 8:30 p.m. And the next table on Exhibit B shows the number of days actually that had trips out of the 192 days. So that means 162 or 84% of days, Monday through Friday after 9 p.m. had no trips. As far as Saturday after 8:30 p.m., 26 out of the 39 days, or 67%, had no trips. And then Sunday, just 719 trips. That was just included just to continue the example. Sunday, there'll be no change in the hours there. And then the next table on Exhibit B has the trip purpose for Monday through Friday after 9 p.m. So the top chart is the number of trips, and the bottom chart is the number of riders. So that way you can see if it's one-offs or consistent riders, one person taking many trips, or random people throughout the year, maybe once or twice, taking a trip like that. Let's see. And same as for 8:30 on the right side. It's trips on the top and riders on the bottom. And a little note at the bottom, we've been working with our provider. We went through the list of every person that rode during these times to see if they would be affected. And according to our provider, they've either changed their schedules or they would not be affected by this change.
Okay, I do have a quick question. So in essence, what you're saying is that we're not really saving any money because we're just adjusting the drivers' schedules to match the peak hours when when it's necessary, right?
Right.
But I guess the question I have is, did you get any feedback? I think Scott mentioned that we had something posted in the taxis saying we were going to be changing this and posted. Did we get any feedback or anybody say that they're disgruntled that making this change or?
Right, so we put out the flyer. We haven't gotten any emails, calls, or complaints to the
No complaints
to
or
drivers
anything.
reported.
That's interesting. Supervisor Vispalik.
And along those same lines of moving to more peak times, do we know as far as during those peak times, are the people that are calling for a ride, are they waiting at all? I mean, does it make sense to move it all to that time? Is there a need for it, or is there not a need? I don't know if that makes sense, but moving those drivers to the more peak times, are there people that are waiting for a ride that we can get more rides in, or is it are we just kind of shifting things around to make it make sense? I don't know if that's kind of convoluted.
My answer would be yes, right?
It's kind of a combination of the two. We say shifting a driver around, that instead of working like from 7 to maybe 2, maybe they stay till 3, stuff like that. So, right, so they're staying an extra hour or starting in a lot earlier, an extra hour. Because you can imagine that it's not like we're not moving a lot of hours out there. As you can tell, we don't have 20 drivers on staff at 9 o'clock at night, right? So it's only really a couple drivers that would be impacted. We move their schedules that instead of staying out till 10 o'clock, they maybe start an hour earlier so that they can be during that peak time and be available at that peak time. So that's really what we're talking about. And we're not turning, as you know, with the numbers that you've been seeing for months, we're not turning a whole lot of riders away right now. It's not like we're saying that, ridership is going to go up dramatically, but it gives us that opportunity to provide a couple more rides during that peak time of day versus when we know that there's just not many riders coming at 9 o'clock at night overall.
And I get that. So your shift, if a guy works hypothetical 10 in the morning till 9, he's going to work 9 to 8, or so you're just basically shifting him just a little bit.
Right. We would let them figure out the exact, timing, but that's kind of the gist of it,
Okay.
right? The other option you have too, certainly, and we thought we'd bring this one forward like this, but yes, we certainly could reduce our overall hours too, and not increase the service during the day and just reduce those hours at night. But we figured that it'd be nice to just give us a try for these a short period of time, and budget cycle's right around the corner, and we'll see if this makes an impact or not. And if it doesn't, we'll be talking about reducing the service.
Yeah, that's kind of the comment I would think too, is I kind of like seeing these little tweaks as we go and see what kind of effect we have on the whole ridership. Rather than, like you said, if we have a budget problem and we got to make some cuts, now there's a whole different. Yeah, we'll get some feedback by adjusting this right now.
Operator error on my part. I didn't have my HDMI plugged into my system. Sorry about that.
That's all right. We got the pack right here in front of us too.
Okay, and then Exhibit C is just kind of this same data again, just breaking out into to bar charts here, so you can see that only 6 out of the 37 Mondays had trips. Only 12 out of the 39 Tuesdays had trips. Only 2 out of 39 Wednesdays had trips after 9 p.m. Then it kind of breaks down that data into like the smaller time intervals there in the next tables. This is just supporting data as well.
I guess the only, kind of in closing here, the only comment I would have is that if you have anybody posting that they're angry we cut hours, because after the fact they might realize, oh crap, they did really cut their hours, right? If you could just let us know if you get a lot of complaints or something on that, so we can kind of track that and get a feel or feedback from the community.
Okay.
Other than that, does anybody else have any questions on this?
I have a question.
Yes.
Why do we continue this on on Saturdays and Sundays. There is very little usage on the weekends.
Let's see.
I certainly will not disagree with that statement. There is very little use, and if that is something that the board or committee, is looking at having us doing, a larger change like that, what our policy, your policy, is if the change is 10% or less, then it just goes to this committee like we're doing right now, public meeting. If it's over 10%, then it's a public hearing. And so we're looking at doing is try to make some minor changes and staying within those boundaries. If the committee's purview is to do something a little larger than that, we certainly are more than willing to bring that back to the committee as the policy makers here and see what that looks like. And we would certainly need some time to make sure that the public is aware of it and put those flyers out there and all the Facebook postings and all that kind of stuff that we should do to make sure that they're out there and available. I think before we do that, I think we could do an analysis and bring that back to you. How many riders actually use that and what purpose they're used for, just like the pie charts that are up on the screen right now to see what kind of impact that would be. The previous committee did have a public hearing on the Commuter Express and the fare increases. And so we have done it before. So it's not like we wouldn't be able to do that.
No, I think that was a far bigger thing than this is. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's fractional. It's 20% of the, 20%, 40% of a weekday. It's a significant drop in usage, and so, I mean, at some point, it's just not. It just doesn't seem like it's very smart to continue that if you're going to do that. I mean, that is actually something I would like to see. Who's using it and where they're going on the weekends to evaluate something like that. Because it's evenly spread out through every hour. It's just that the twos and threes, the whole thing is just. I mean, that is to me just low hanging fruit that you just have to look at and say, for efficiency and to have some regard for the taxpayers' dollars. I mean, my gosh.
I would agree with that too.
I mean, those numbers are, that's unsustainable. If you were running a business, a private business, there's no way you could sustain anything in that. And I'm not equating it to that. I'm just saying these numbers are way off. I mean, you're talking about on a weekday where you see 22s and 23s, there are 2s and 3s. You're 5% of a weekday. That's just, you can't be all things to all people all the time. You do the best you can, in my opinion.
Well, one question related to that would be how many drivers do you have on staff on a weekday versus a Saturday or a Sunday? So maybe if you could provide the information of like maybe an average time for a trip, if you have that, or some way to look at how many, tell us how many drivers you have on the weekdays versus Saturday and Sunday, and then maybe an average time per trip. Because if they're staffing down, for Saturday and Sunday, it might make sense to keep that.
Well, I would agree. I think for sure that's probably happening.
But the time per trip might help too in evaluating that.
Okay. Yeah,
that is something we've had provided in the past, the amount of drivers per hour. So it's something we easily can provide. There's no doubt we don't have like 20 drivers sitting there waiting on Saturday, correct? Based on usage.
I'm assuming
correct.
That wouldn't make sense
right.
at all, so I'm assuming
right.
That's not happening.
Right. That is not happening. But yes, we can certainly provide some information and data to this committee at the next meeting if that's acceptable. I don't want to get too far off the agenda topic today.
Yes. No. I'm just saying because I certainly agree with what what we want to do here, and that is just working around the edges. This would be more of a meat of the bone type of thing. Yes, thank you.
And staying with this, and thank you for that. But with Supervisor McCulick's questions there, could you share, Scott, with the committee, how often can we make these changes before we have to go to a public hearing? I mean, we talked about doing this now. We don't need a public hearing. But do we have to wait 6 months before we make another adjustment if we get feedback and we kind of see where this is going, or?
No, your policy does not have any timeframes in it, correct, Charlie?
Right, yeah,
Right.
there's no time frame.
So it's just a matter of if it's less than 10%, it's just a public meeting like we're having right now. Anything over 10% would be a public hearing. And then, as you know, just open it to the public, we would make sure we got to post it for a couple weeks and all that kind of stuff. So we would have that discussion, bring you the data in December. Then if you so would choose, then we would look to have a public hearing at some time in January, February, wherever the committee's pleasure is to have that, to make sure we have enough time to get those public comments and to have them here and available to comment on that.
Yeah, or if it would behoove us too, if we could, like I said, if we don't get any feedback and we find that the ridership on the weekends is really low, what if we go and make another adjustment like that, maybe cutting an hour out on a weekend deal or cutting a driver down or whatever, make slow adjustments and then just see what kind of feedback we get. Maybe we'd be able to make some more progress that way versus doing a one big change, right?
Yes, and we would look at a lot of data for you. And so I know several years ago, many years ago, I should say now, one of the things was getting people to church on Sundays and stuff. So that'd be one thing we look at as well to see what, again, that use that we talked about in that pie chart, where they're going for. We just make sure that you're aware of what that use is for, so that when you have the public hearing, you're not shocked by the people that come and speak to you.
Okay. I guess I forgot to ask, am I supposed to take a motion on this thing?
Yes.
We do?
Yes.
I couldn't remember if this was just a discussion item or is this an action
Yes.
item?
Yes.
Okay.
We would appreciate an action from this
My
body.
apologies, I should have been on
Yes.
top of that in the
Sorry.
beginning. I'll need a motion in a second. A motion from Supervisor McCulick, a second from Supervisor Hartwig. Is there any other discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Then we'll move on to 2024 resolution, discontinue excess right-of-way and authorize sale of adjoining landowner. This one I know I need a motion in a second. A motion from Supervisor Vespalic, a second from Supervisor Garoff. And I assume Scott wants to take this one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up on your screen and in your packet, you'll see an aerial photo of the land that we were talking about. Again, this committee is aware of land that we're trying, that's along county highways right away, that we're trying to get back onto the tax roll. This is one of those parcels. This individual actually contacted us on this. That was on their radar from years ago. They remembered it. And so they contacted us on this parcel. You'll see that they own the land to the left of the little blue hatched area. So the area we're looking at selling to adjoining landowners is the area that's shaded this very, very light blue in the picture here. You can see it's got a river running through it and mostly wetlands. And so the individual wants to put up another outbuilding, and they can only have so many outbuildings so many square foot of outbuildings per square foot of lot. And so they need more acreage to put up another outbuilding. And so that, as you know, then that affects their assessment later on and get more tax money and so on. So we did look at this. We talked to the Village of Richfield, which is the scenic road. We looked at our future road plan. County Highway Q could certainly be 4 lanes in this area at some point. So we make sure we kept enough right of way for that to happen. So we're in favor of this, and everything else, dollar amounts and stuff like that is in your packet. So if you have any further questions, certainly happy to ask them, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Supervisor Vespalic.
The only question I have is, why is this in Public Works and not Land Use and Planning?
It was purchased as county highway right of way. And so anything that's along the county highway right of way, the county highway has control of. So if it was land like on county campus, it'd go to executive. If it was in a park, it'd go to planning and park. So it's just a matter of who purchased the right of way and
Jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction, correct. And this was you, Public Works, Highway Committee, Transportation Committee many years ago.
And this kind of follows a path of trying to get away from owning a lot of land. Right?
Yes,
At the
correct.
government level.
Correct.
Yeah.
Getting it back on the
Getting
tax
it
roll.
back
And
on the tax roll, yeah.
again, it's not going to have a major impact because it is wetland, but it does help the land individual as well, being able to put up another outbuilding.
Absolutely.
And furthermore.
Supervisor McCullough? Yep.
Scott, so question for you. So 5.26 acres, $3,100. Who comes up with the land value for that?
Ted Dumpke in our office staff. You might remember we just recently sold some wetland to the state of Wisconsin, and we're buying wetland out on Kaneohe M. So we looked at the prices that we are technically paying for wetland, and I'll call it non-buildable land.
So
and then
if it's wetland, how can he use it to put another outbuilding?
he's not using the land to put his outbuilding, but he needs the square footage. So if you can have, let's just say you can have.
On the total footprint.
Correct,
you have
yes, correct. He needs to have, let's say if you can have 10 square feet of building for every 100 square feet of land. So if you double your land, you can now have double the amount of square footage. So
got it. Thank you.
he is not putting it on that property.
No, okay.
That I could tell
I
you.
think the DNR would have a little,
A lot of people would have an issue with that,
Yeah.
yes.
No, that's just questioning.
Yep.
okay. Supervisor Hartwig?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It'll give him a little over 7 acres. So how big of a building does he want to put up there?
I don't know how big of a building is. That's kind of a more question to the village, whatever they allow. I'm sure he'll like to put up as big as he can. So it's actually only 1 acre. He owns, if there's an error in the report, I apologize. He owns 2 acres and it's another acre on top of that.
Yep.
In the corner there, it does say 5.26 acre. I'm not sure what that is.
Which corner?
It's down underneath the 1.33 DOE, and then it says 5.26 acre.
Looks like 7 acres to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was looking at the scale.
Sorry about that. The 5 acres is what we bought that goes all the way through Highway Q, over, up Scenic Road, that whole wide area. So to take out, if you look up on the screen, I can mirror it out. So we bought the land, it goes up here, over, up, all the way over here, back down and over. So that was the when we purchased the land originally, it was 5 acres of the whole big block. So 1.99 acres is the current acreage, and it is correct in the resolution. 1.105 acres is what we're actually. So it's 3,000. So if you want to think about it as 3,000 an acre, is what
That
we're
makes sense. Now that makes sense. All right.
what we're looking at right now. My apologies, I didn't look that closely at the image.
I
So
could see the confusion on
yeah,
that.
sorry about that.
So,
Yeah, that's
no problem.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll vote approve. Or-
You have to make a motion.
We did make a motion already. Okay, all approved, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, resolution, let's see, the 2060 Transportation Network Sustainability Plan. I believe we need a motion and a second to get this going as well. A motion by Supervisor Vispalik, second by Hartwig. Supervisor Hartwig. I'm falling apart here. Scott, is that something you'd like to touch base on as well?
Yes, actually, I would like to spend a little bit of time going through this because the committee hasn't seen one of the 2060 plans, or what we're calling 2060 plans now going forward. So if it's indulgent, I'd like about 10 to 15 minutes of your time to kind of roll through what we do typically for these. We have completed 2050 plans for the Village of Kewaskum and City of West Bend. What we looked at doing is probably try to get 2 of these done a year. We're a little behind right now. We go into the City of Hartford as well as the Town of Farmington's. Town of Farmington met with them earlier this week. Hopefully finalize that one and bring that to you in December. But before you see a draft version for the City of Hartford, I want to stress it's a draft version. It will still go once staff at the City of Hartford has more chance to review it. We'll finalize that document and bring it before the City Council in the City of Hartford. So when it is a draft version. We also looked at 2050 keeps getting closer and closer, and it's just a couple more years. We went out all the way to 2060 for these because part of our strategic priorities is the county has to go out to 2060. So we thought, well, it makes more sense to do the local municipalities out to 2060, which takes a little more time, but is good in the end. And I have it up on your screen, what it looks like and what we're going through. I won't hit on everything, and I certainly will not be reading it page per page, but what we're looking at doing is we did a 2050 plan to see how much funding we needed at the Washington County's level to make sure that if we spend X amount of dollars per year, are we going to have enough money to do all of our roadways, and what does that look like? And are we just putting ourselves in a deeper hole, and then at some point going, holy cow, we have a really big problem. And so we looked at our plan first of all, and the county executive felt it was very necessary to do that for the local governments as well. And like I said, we pick up about 2 per every year. And what we do with that plan is, the first thing we do is obviously we work very closely with the local municipality and our GIS department and our county's IT department. They created this nice program that we can put a lot of this information into, which provides a lot of data back to us. The first thing we do is we get a street inventory of every street that they have. We also get where they have alleys and parkings, just like we did for the city of West Bend. So we know where those are because they have to be accounted for as well. You just can't ignore alleys in the cities as much as they might want to, or people think they do. They do often need to be paved as well. And then what to do is every road has in this Whistler system, as Wisconsin state system, every municipality has to put their roadways in there. And they get what's called a PASER rating. And on I don't know the page number that I'm on right here, page 4 of that particular report, you'll see that in the upper right-hand corner, the roads are rated every other year, and they're rated from excellent down to failed. Excellent, it's brand new pavement typically, and failed means it's probably back to gravel. And so you'll see that it's listed as excellent, goods, fair, and then poor quality. And in that little spreadsheet, kind of gives you a percentage of how many of the roads are in good or better condition, how many are in fair. And the city of Hartford's roads are, for the most part, in pretty good or upper fair condition. When you want to start replacing them is when you're definitely in that poor range. That 3 range is when it's basically pothole after pothole, and it's time to replace. So you can see the city's been doing a pretty good job historically about keeping most of the roads in good upper fair or good condition. So, and of course we got some pictures of what that kind of looks like in the report, and then we got a nice map to see, so you can see that again. Red is poor. The yellow or orange is fair, and then the greens are good. So if you can just kind of look at that, map and kind of squint your eyes a little bit going, there's not a lot of red on that map overall when you compare it to some other municipalities that we've completed in the past. And so we get that data, and then we look at the PASER deterioration chart and going, all right, we've got all this historical data, and how long do your roads really last in the city of Hartford? And so if you have a pavement that's 50 years old, what condition is it in? Just because a pavement is old doesn't necessarily mean it's in bad shape. Just because a pavement is newer doesn't also necessarily mean it's going to be in good shape. A lot of factors go into that. How thick they did, how many water main breaks maybe they have in the area, or sewer problems. Did they put enough asphalt down? Garbage trucks going through there? All that kind of stuff, or other heavy truck traffic that they maybe weren't anticipating 20, 30 years ago. And so you can see a lot of the city of Hartford roads are, even if they're older, they're still in that 6 and above range, which is really, really good. So it means a lot of their pavements are holding well. So it means that somebody did something right 50, 60 years ago when they actually built a lot of those roadways. What we do is then we put all that information into this computer program. And what we do in that computer program is, all right, we have all this data on the condition of the roadways. Let's put in traffic volume as well. And why we do that is to anticipate, so we can tell the cities or villages, okay, these roads are maybe a higher priority because they get higher volume of traffic. That if you have a poor road that has 20 cars a day and a poor road that has 200 cars a day, which one should you do first? I would surmise, and our computer program says, do the one with 200 cars a day because you're impacting 200 people versus only 20. And so that computer program kind of figures that out and says, okay, we should do these roads first. We're not ignoring those roads, but if you got to prioritize, we're going to prioritize the higher volume road first. And so we got a nice map, again, of all the roads that have higher traffic volumes and ones that have lower traffic volumes. And in a report like this, and we've got the computer behind the screens, it's hard to see in this report because it kind of blends all in together, but the city, trust me, has the background data and can zoom into the PDFs and zoom out and actually has access to a computer system behind the scenes. And we break those into categories as well. Also in the municipalities, very important are utilities. And so we talk to the city about their water main breaks, because you can also imagine if you have water main break, water main break, water main break, at some point you got to replace that water main, and you just otherwise you're just chasing your tail. And so we put that into the program too, and I realized that if we got two roads that they're both a PASER 3, they both have 200 cars, what's next? This one has poor utilities. let's replace that utility and replace that roadway first because it's going to save the taxpayer in the city of Hartford a lot more money if we do that first versus a road that maybe doesn't need the water main. And so we also looked at water utility breaks, sewer breaks, and where that need is. But also we looked at the age of the utilities. Again, just because something might be 50 years old doesn't mean it necessarily needs to be replaced, but the more likelihood of that need to be replaced is there. And so you'll see another map that's up there of Bart. The red is, again, the older utilities. The orange or yellows are not quite as old, and the green are newer. And again, not a surprise, it's around the older part of the city of Hartford, right? That downtown area and the areas surrounding that. So again, if you're choosing a road that is all things considered, should you do one that has a 100-year-old sewer and water system or one that's only 40 years old? Let's do the one that's 100 first and save ourselves some money by not having those water main breaks and all that kind of stuff. So the computer program takes that into account too. It's quite a robust program. And then we have a little breakout of that area. Again, it doesn't have the road names listed, but if you're familiar with the city of Hartford, and the city of Hartford is certainly familiar with their own utilities, kind of get a little flavor for what that looks like, blown up area. And again, like we looked at areas of failure. So working on map 7, we work with the water utility and where are their priority areas? And they do a great job over there keeping track of how many water main breaks they've had and all that issue, or maybe water pressure problems, whatever they have. And so we put that into the computer system as well. And we look at roadway utilities that are outside of roadways, so we don't ignore them in case the utility wants to know how old those are. So those are actually on the drawing too. So if you see a utility that's not in a roadway, we did that for the utilities assistance, so they know that I don't want to connect a 100-year-old water main to a 20-year-old water main to a 100-year water main and skip one. And so we did that as well. So we got the utility age summary map that's in there. We also looked at future development areas. Again, we talked about if you want to repave a roadway, but there's going to be 3 more subdivisions coming on, you want to make sure you build that the correct width and thickness and stuff like that. And also traffic volumes that might be on those roadways. So we looked for future development areas that could come to the city. Again, this is their anticipation of what could come. Not saying it will happen, but that potential is what's out there. They also included their tax incremental finance districts in there. Like I said, the whole future development, they're all listed. I'm not going to go through all those. And so I'm just going to skim through that. They also wanted to include that they recently adopted the ATV, UTV use, so we wanted to include the map of those locations in there because it has to do with roadways, but has very little impact about which roads you're going to do. We did not put that into the computer model, just to be full disclosure on that. Then we have the payment life cycle because part of the program also takes into account maintenance on your roadways and how much you should spend on maintenance and when that maintenance should be done. Now, we don't include a lot of the tables in there because it's a lot of tables, but basically if you're maintaining your road at the beginning, you can get that payment to last a lot longer, and it saves you money in the long run, is what that's what's all about right there. And we work with the city of Hartford to get their project costs. And so it's each individual. So a road might cost differently up in Farmington versus city of West Bend versus city of Hartford, all their standards and stuff like that. So we got their individual cost per foot based on projects. As you can see in that little chart, we include an inflation rate on that as well. That's adjustable. If they want to choose 6, we can put 6 in there. If they want to put 2 in there, we can put 2 in there. We just work with them to put what rate might be as well. And like I said, we throw all that into this GIS application and IT application, and we actually, what we can do is we can lock roads in a certain year, so they know they've got a 5-year CIP, so they want to say, hey, let's lock these roads in. Again, just like our CIP that you'll see, they'll review their CIP every year, every 2 years, and they'll make changes and adjustments. And that is a critical thing for the public to understand that even though this document may say, hey, your road's going to be done in 2032, that doesn't mean your road's going to be done in 2032. That means the likelihood, yeah, it's right around there. But when you get closer to 2032, another road might get worse quicker. There also could be that road holds up a lot better, right? You're talking about averages. You saw that map with dots all over the place. It wasn't a perfect line, right, when you look at all the data. And so it's just trying to estimate saying, yep, we based on the volume and the water main and the sewer, this is when we think your road should be done in the plan. And that's one thing that scares municipalities the most, because they're worried about people coming with this plan 5 years from now and going, you said my road would be done, and it's not. And we just want to emphasize that it's a plan. It's really the high level to make sure that you're funding your plan and it's going to be successful going out forward. And again, you don't have all of a sudden the year 2040 going, oh, we got 50 miles of road to do because we've only been doing, a tenth of a mile every year, right? So it's more of the big picture, but you'll see coming up, we got lots of maps, and that's what people want to look at. And then we have their scheduled dollar amounts that they typically spend per year and how many alleys they do. And then one of the more important spreadsheets that are up there is what does that look like that out until 2060, they'll get about 22 miles of road scheduled. Not scheduled as 51 miles. And then what we do is we take that going, if your average road lasts 60 years, is that enough? And that's the analysis we've got to work at with the city on that and look at that and really dive into that yet with them once we have all the maps completed. We had a little glitch in the system that we're trying to work out right now. And that was because the city said we're spending $900,000, but in their locked roads, it's more than $900,000. And so what the computer program did going, well, I got $900,000, but you're spending $1.2 million. So that is, the computer program saved the money from the following, like those years out, like in 29 and 2030, and said, I'm using that money in the years prior to it. Well, we all know that doesn't work real well, but that's what the computer program did because we haven't had a community lock that many roads in for the first couple of years. So we got a little glitch here. We'll get that straightened out and then get that figured out, and that's when we'll finalize the maps with the city. And what you see next is a nice overall street map. It's got a whole lot of colors on it. And one thing also we got to work with the city on yet once we finalize that little glitch is I'll just pick on this roadway that's here that the purple might be in 2030, and that red one might be in 2031, and that one might be in 2032. It might make more sense to do them all at one time. The computer program isn't smart enough to say, oh, look, that stretch of roadway, I should do that one year, that another year, that another year. It's not smart enough to figure out I should maybe bundle those together. It's also not smart enough to know which way the sewer goes. And when you want to do a sewer project, you want to start at the lower end first and work your way up. It also doesn't know exactly which stretch of water main might be more important to them to do first, or it should all be done as one big block. So you can see a lot of those, and that's when we'll lock those roads together. We did it over here when they're 2025, I think, one of their projects. So we said, that's a road segment, that's a road segment, that's a road segment. Let's merge those together and do them all as one project. So that's one thing we have to do with the city yet. And I'll pick on Cedar. That's down here. It goes towards the high school. It's all supposed to be done, but there's got to be some logic behind it too, going, okay, this is a segment we should do first, and how much can we actually bite off at one time and upset the citizens and all that kind of stuff. So there's still some work to be done on the back end of this. I'd say we're probably at that 90-95% range right now. We're really close, as you can tell. And I'm not going to go through individual maps, but again, that's what they had predicted in 25. In 27, 2029, like we had that glitch, didn't have any roads done. And then out and onward, the other stretch of roadway. So we go through, we have all the maps that are in there. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those because they will be changing. Then we have the future improvements to kind of lays them all out by every 5 years to know what you're spending on sewer, water, and the surface of the roadway. And then we talk about funding of the plan and how they actually fund that plan and what funds they actually utilize for those plans. And then how much we actually fund to allocate. And that's where on this allocation, if they want to, we can put in that program, if you borrow $5 million in 2025, what does that look like? How many miles of road can you do? If you borrow $2 million every third year, what does that look like? And we can really start playing with that with their administration or staff and going, all right, this is what you can accomplish if you just do these couple little things at the beginning of the plan or throughout the plan versus just $900,000 per year. You'll also notice we had that button I talked about before for inflation. One thing this Public Works Committee did many years ago under John Bullo's watch is that the amount of funds the county highway department was getting for roads every year was adjusted to inflation. 3% per year, it just went up, right? Because he knew that our project costs were going up 3% per year. What the city did saying, we know the projects are going up 3% every year. So they had 3% for the cost of the projects every year, but they kept the budget at $900,000 every year. right? So that gap just keeps getting wider and wider. Now, if you adjust it for inflation, then you may get a couple more roads done. So that's one thing we'd show them too, going, if you decide to do both, keep it, then you basically keep that same trajectory. So that's one thing they got to look at as well, because the odds of them still spending only $900,000 in 2060, you can imagine your dollars most likely not going to go as far as it is in 2030, 30 years prior, right? I think we all understand that logic, right? So that was their take on it first, but if you did the math the other way, and that computer program is certainly able to do that. But right now they're being ultra conservative, saying it's 900,000 every year for the next 30 years, basically. So that's one thing that the computer program can do, and we sit down, we work with them going, all right, that way they can later on, if they got to go and need to go borrow funds, we can use the application and make the case, or we're borrowing because now look what we're getting done in the long run, right? And look at the long-term picture, not just look at the next 3 years, 4 years, but let's look 20 years, 30, 40 years out and see how we're impacting our roadways in the city of Hartford in this instance. And we give them some different funding options that they could possibly, take advantage of going forward through general transportation aid and earmarks and wheel tax and all that kind of stuff that they could do. Again, we have a short synopsis of what they'd have to do. Again, we got to finalize that yet. It's still in draft format. Same schedule. And then another spreadsheet on that. Again, the roads that are going to be done with the current level of funding. And so if they want to have the current level of funding in this plan and saying, hey, let's also borrow $2 million every other year, we can have another spreadsheet right below this and saying, if you did option B, this is what it would look like. If you did option C, this is what it looked like. That the elected officials can use this as a tool to see, if what they're doing is successful or what they should do maybe more or less. And then, of course, we list every road that's in the project down below, a nice long spreadsheet as well. So if you want to know particular your years and how much it's going to cost and stuff like that is in the plan. And at the very end, we do an executive summary because it ends up being, before I gloss over that, is we do have a bunch of policy decisions in there too for them to look at and to consider, where do they put their road system on their prioritization list and how important it is to fund your sewer and water system and stuff like a lot of information in there. So you'll see a lot of good questions in there that the city council can ask themselves to help determine what level of funding is actually needed at the city level. Policy questions like, is it 2 alleys per year? Is it 1? Are the council people getting a lot of phone calls on alleys or not a 1? So that's just some policy decisions that, staff that I work with staff, their best guess, but it's really the policy deciders who should decide, well, maybe we should do 2 alleys a year, right? If we're getting a lot of complaints on that from their constituents, maybe 1 is great. And that's what the program can look at and going how often they actually get done and how many you can do. So again, a lot of good questions there. Then, like I said, we got a 2-page executive summary at the end because we realize that after 45 pages, they might not be interested in reading all of that. And so it's a nice thing they can put on their website as a quick summary for the residents in the city of Hartford, as well as anybody that doesn't want to read all 45 pages, give them a short little brief window into what that might look like. And that's the end of the plan. Like I said, I want to emphasize that this is a draft plan for the city of Hartford. We still got to finalize it with staff before it goes before their council. We're hopeful that they'll take it before their council to review it and approve it like we've done with the other transportation plans. It might not be in their December meeting. Depends on, there's a lot of holidays coming up right now, especially the deer hunting holiday. And so it might not be till after the first of the year, but we want to get this in front of your hand and your eyes right now to see what we're doing behind the scenes and doing for them. I know you've seen the intersection safety plan and the roadway plan. This is another one that we're doing in-house at no cost to the cities or villages or towns. And so it's important to get this in front of you as well. And we looked at this meeting agenda and we don't know exactly what's coming in January, February, March, but thought we had some time this month to take a look at it. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions that
Yeah, I actually have a couple quick questions for you. So, I mean, this is an awesome guide, right? To anybody who's on any committee or anything can look at this and kind of say, wow, this is going to be expensive, but this is what's required to keep our roads going. And I'm glad you touched base on the inflation part of it, the 3%. How often have you, like, for instance, we have our 2050, now we're going to extend it to 2060.
Yep.
It's kind of hard to look out to see what inflation's going to be over that time. Has there been any tweaks, or is 3% a pretty good average overall? Because some years might be only 2%, but then you get like an 8% like we had a couple of years ago. It just catches up real quick, right?
The great thing on that is I use our finance department and they give me the number. I don't have a
Smart.
crystal ball and they don't have a crystal ball. 3% has been historical. I mean, yes, we are certainly guesstimating out just a few years. And if you go out 20 years, yeah, we're throwing a dart at the board and just saying 3% going forward. We certainly have the capability to put different numbers in for different years. We could do 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 2, 2, 2. But I mean, you're just guessing at that point. You know, that many years out. I don't think anybody would have guessed a couple of years ago that we'd have what we did. You know, it's hard to predict out that far. So if it does happen, then you know that's you just bring that back to the committee or board and going. Because you all know if we have an 8% year again, right, that it's not going to be hidden. It's not going to be a surprise to you to go, yeah, we had 8% and it impacted us, you know, this way and that way. So right now all we can do is just guess. And if when we do our 2060 plan and coming forward to the board early next year, if you so choose, you want me to show 4% in there, okay.
Sure.
It's a number for me.
Yeah.
So.
If historical was 3%, it's fair.
Sure.
Right.
Who knows what's going to happen in these next 4 years? Inflation go down and things change again. Historical is 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Supervisor McCulloch?
As the city of Hartford guy, Scott, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
So this is sort of a high, a 10,000-foot view thing. So first of all, this is a collaborative effort.
Yes.
So you don't know. So you or guys like Darrell Cron, so they all work, and they're going to bring this before the Common Council. That's the next step. On this.
We hope so, yes.
Yeah.
Again, we don't
At
control
some
that.
point,
Correct,
yeah.
yes.
At some point. Okay. So then the second question is on page 4 when they're looking and you're noting the PASER ratings for the city. In your opinion, if you looked at that for a municipality, how does that seem to you? Does it seem am I in the 50 percentile? Am I?
You're doing very well.
I'm doing very well. So with those PASER ratings.
Compared to the 3 other municipalities that we've done so far.
Okay.
The city of Hartford, Village of Kewaskum, and town of Farmington. Yes, you're doing very well.
All right, and then another question would be, and this is another one I would just ask you: do you think the city of Hartford, with regard to some of these alternative funding sources, so state grants, federal grants, ARPA, that ship may have sailed, but there's others. Are we pursuing those?
You have historically.
We have.
I don't want to say right now today, but yes, you've been actively looking for the STP funds and the Fed funds, and I've been working with previous village engineers, city engineers, on make sure they get the funding. And a couple of those things are listed in there, the LRIP and stuff like that, and they actually just received some state funding for Independence Avenue out in the industrial park. For instance, I forget the dollar amount, I apologize, but I think it was over $1 million or something right around there that they received. Yeah, that's part of the STP program.
Okay, that's the one that you noted in here.
Correct. Yep.
Is that,
Yep.
Is that
So
that's a state program?
it is a state program. The federal money gives federal money down to the state. The state gets to decide how to distribute that. We were in our own little world, if you will. We were called the West Bend Urbanized District, and we got several $1 million to divide up between the city of West Bend, Washington County, Village of Slinger, Village of Jackson, City of Hartford, as well as the municipalities that kind of connect those, the towns that connect those. Unfortunately, with the 2020 census, the federal government decided to change the rules, and then we no longer have our own dedicated pot of money for that area. And so we are now with the whole statewide selection committee on that. And so now if I want to apply for that same funds or the city does in the future, you're now competing statewide for that fund. And I have my own commentary on why the federal government did that. we also lost out of the Milwaukee urbanized area. We were in that pot of money too. What they did, they realized is that with the 2010 census, that they were able to expand out into suburban areas to include them in that pot of money, just like ours, they were able to what they called hop, skip, and jump to grab other communities to get these urbanized area. And I think they did not want all the suburban areas to have all the funding, and so they got rid of a lot of them. And so now, like the city of Milwaukee gets a lot of the funding because you take away the Village of Germantown, Village of Richfield, Washington County out of that fund, the pot of money doesn't go down. It's just a lot of the suburbs are no longer part of that process. Correct. So I know it was really big in the Atlanta area and stuff like that, that a lot of their suburbs were no longer included in that. And so just a way to redistribute the funds at the federal government level.
More into the larger urban areas and less into the
Suburbs, correct.
rural.
Yep. So, well, the next census comes up and we'll see who's in the chair out in Washington, D.C. and if the rules change back.
One can only hope.
The current one won't make a difference because that rule's already been set for the next 10 years. So we have to wait till 2033
Oof.
or for 2030 census. So who's ever in office at that time, they'll make the rules.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. Thanks.
Certainly.
Take me back. Did we motion on this one? Or was this just a discussion?
I don't know that there's anything.
This was just a discussion item, right?
It was, yes. And I think you did take a motion on
Oh,
the
did
floor.
I take a
though.
motion? We don't have to take a vote then, right? Good.
I'm not the parliamentarian.
All right, let's not take a vote. We put a thumbs up on this one, let's just say that.
And we would like to bring, once the town of Farmington's is near complete, we'll bring that one back. Obviously, with going through the whole discussion today, that would be a much shorter discussion. But just to kind of go through their plans, because having a rural one is different than the one in the city. So
I would be interested as we complete these for all the different townships and stuff, to know who is in the worst positions. And the reason I'm not saying that to pick on anybody, but in my conversations, for instance, with the town of Wayne, they are strapped for cash. They have nothing but farmers, big blocks of farms, so their tax base is very low. But yet they still have roads and bridges and stuff they have. So if they have one road project, they got to borrow money, even if it's $400,000, because their budget is so small. So it'd be interesting to know which ones are hurting the most, I guess. I don't know what we'll gain out of it, but it'd just be interesting to know where they're at. I appreciate it. All right, with that being said, nobody else has any comments. Next meeting date is Thursday, December 19th, 2024 at 3. And thank you very much for being here, people. We're adjourned.
I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Land Use and Planning Committee. This meeting is open to the public and has been duly notified by the clerk's office within our papers and radio and whatnot that they do. So please rise and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so we have Supervisor Pridemore is on Zoom with us today. And we wish Don well. I hope he's doing well. You let him know that I'm praying for him, and we all are. I hope he's doing better. And Supervisor Conrath is excused. But we do have a quorum, so we will proceed. First, are there any, we have the minutes posted. Are there any changes or things that need to be done? Seeing none, I will consider them accepted. First item on the discussion list is Register of Deeds Quarterly Report. And for that, we'll have our new Register of Deeds, soon to be, Lisa Budish.
Okay, so as you say, I am Lisa Budish, the new Register of Deeds elect.
Did you?
Oh, sorry. All new to me. Can you hear me now? Okay. So I am Lisa Budish. I am the Register of Deeds elect, and I am presenting for the Register of Deeds office. And our reports are on page 5 through 8 of the agenda. I hope you had time to review those informational sheets, and are there any questions regarding those? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Sharon usually wasn't that quick.
Yeah, it's kind of different, I guess. There's a new world out there. Okay. Let's see. We have cost share contracts. Jamie, will you be presenting on that? Is there something?
Questions I can
Okay.
try to answer them.
So we'll just go through questions on that. This is something we've done before. It's more or less pass-through items. Are there any questions on that?
Any action required?
I do not believe so. I think that's just a discussion item. Possible action. We don't need action on that, do we?
No.
I didn't think so. Yeah. All right. Moving on, I'm going to make a little bit of a change. We're going to move to D, resolution, grant application, Wisconsin Department of Transportation. This is the item that we've been postponing for the last couple of months because it was not quite finished up. It actually happens. So what was going on, and I believe in transparency, I want to make sure that everybody understands it, that with the bridge at Holy Hill Road being replaced, there was an attempt to put a connecting trail from Germantown over to Richfield, and we had some difficulties appropriating the land that would be necessary to do that. Unfortunately, the landowners weren't really cooperative, and I don't really see a need to push the item. Certainly we want to keep this project on track. So with that, I guess what we would do, or what we're wanting to do, is entertain a motion to postpone indefinitely, which would would kind of lose the trail and keep the bridge intact. So if anybody would like to offer up a motion to postpone indefinitely.
I would so move for
Move.
discussion purposes.
Moved by Carol Mary, seconded by Brian Krebs. And discussion questions?
So the move to postpone indefinitely, is this anticipated that we would try to bring this up at a future meeting date when landowners might be more open to it, or what's the long-term?
Effectively, I think it would pretty much kill that portion of this project, the trail project, but I'm not sure as far as if the bridge would accommodate it for future, so I'll leave that to Ms. Ludwig to answer that.
Sure. So there is interest from the village of Richfield in a future sidewalk or multi-use path, in this case, in this location. There is not a desire to delay the highway project or the bridge project for uncertainty if we would know if the two landowners would sell the property or not. They would need to willingly sell. We got a response less than favorable, and so in applying for the grants to fund the path, they would need to start designing it, and we would have to pay that with the risk of not understanding if the landowners would be willing to sell. So the postponing this resolution indefinitely, I guess it would be foreseeable that there could be some sort of a grant application in the future, if that's the question. I guess I would almost have to defer to legal on if they could bring back the resolution. It would not be in the near term. It would be when the current houses in question convert to a commercial property or develop per the Village of Richfield's planning, because these two properties are on kind of the main corridor across from Loppenheimer's garage, if you know where that is. So they long-term may or may not remain residential properties.
Mr. Chairman,
The chair recognizes Chairman Schleif.
I believe if we postpone indefinitely, that kills it for this session. But this session is up in about a year and a half, and I don't think this project's going to happen until 26 anyway.
Correct. That was the course of action we discussed for the time being. And I would suggest that we would, if there was a need, it could potentially be in some slightly different way, shape, or form, or we would have that discussion. Because that was the recommendation we talked about.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, I guess that does basically kill it for the session, but it could be brought back later should we decide to, next session, assuming we all get voted in, if there were a path in the future that they decide to put in a trail or whatever. But again, I think the important thing is that we keep this bridge project going, keep that on track, because that's something we don't want to get behind on.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
To what degree does this have any influence on the design of the bridge structure itself, such that when whoever builds it, whether it's federal money, state money, or county money, whatever, that the bridge itself is built with some room for a bike path? I mean, if you're going to do this 10 years from now, you almost need to make sure the bridge is built such that the bridge could accommodate a bike path when the time comes.
The cost for just the parapet work on the bridge alone would be $240,000. That would be an option we could locally fund and not pursue the grant application. The bridge is not currently being planned for pedestrian accommodations.
It's not being planned that way.
It wouldn't be absent this application. So our application and attempt to fund this project locally was kind of the plan. We did talk about that exact concept of if we could just do the bridge, and unfortunately that wouldn't score well in the grant applications for pedestrian accommodations. So they more or less said that it was unlikely that we would receive a CMAQ grant for air quality or transportation and pedestrian funding without the multi-use path portion of the project. So then we would just be 100% of the improvements to the bridge for this purpose.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
To follow up, Jamie, with your
Supervisor
comments.
Krebs?
The reason us, the county, are discussing this is because this was a bike path. This is a state project for the bridge replacement, right?
Yes.
So the state could still build a pedestrian walkway through there if they wanted, and it's really Richfield's project at that point.
That is all correct. The project did not score high in their criteria for whether or not they fund pedestrian and bike accommodations. That's what led it down the path of it would need to be 100% locally funded. So the Village of Richfield was uninterested in paying 100% of the cost. So that was kind of how the county got involved with both the Village of Germantown and the Village of Richfield in agreeing to be the grant applicant to try to lower the cost. The property acquisition needed in this case, though, is really the hang-up because the state cannot condemn property for a path. So if we are unable to acquire it, the project can't happen. And they're at a point where they would need to design it, and they're asking us to sign agreements reimbursing for those costs.
Okay, that makes sense to me then.
All right, Ms. Pridemore, you have any questions? You all good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, seeing as there's no further questions, I'll signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so it is indefinitely postponed. Moving on. We will go to the Eisenbaum Trail discussion. So let's give a little background here on what it is that we're here for tonight. There's been some community interest in the Eisenbaum as far as paving it or not paving it. Certainly has been discussion around. I can tell you that I have nothing on my radar to do so, and nor is there any discussion of it happening or anything like that. But because the community has been asking or has shown an interest, we decided that we wanted to bring in some people to talk about it, some experts, if you will, and some little bit of cost sharing, things like that, kind of look at the costs, and kind of do a presentation so that we can all learn together what it is that we're talking about and get a rough idea of what this would be like the first step in just seeing if it's feasible even or not. So with that, I believe we might have two groups that would like to speak. So Jamie, I'll let you go ahead and introduce, please.
Bonnie, would you mind? And I don't know, Bonnie, if you were going to have anybody join you or not, but if you guys want to step up to the mic and maybe, share your thoughts and comments with the committee.
Prepared a very short statement on what this is. A request of paving the Eisenbahn Trail from Barton to Kewaskum, Main Street, Highway 28, would create a pathway, connecting our communities and making it more accessible to all ages. Walkers, bikers, and scooter enthusiasts could enjoy this scenic route together. Talked to many people, and they're all, yes, this would be great. Right now, it's not in the best of condition from Barton to Kewaskum. There are pieces missing in bridges, and there's weeds in the middle, and it's just not the safest. So that's essentially what I'm asking. Can this happen?
Okay. Thank you very much, and I appreciate those words. That is what we're here to find out.
Thank you.
So,
thank you.
Okay. You have somebody else?
Sure. Okay. I'm Liz Ilnicki, and I hope you had a chance to look over the letter I emailed to the members for a little background on it. And we're involved with several biking groups in the area, and we just feel like if they would consider it, I think it's time that they would at least go down that route to see if it's feasible and how to improve a multi-use path that would be paved. And because right now with the gravel, it's very prone, if you're on a bike, slip, fall, break a leg or whatever. That's just one concern there. And we do care about other people and trail users in the area, so we want to consider the other users that use it or snowmobilers, so we understand that. And we feel it would be very beneficial to the communities all around here and a connecting road to get to Kewaskum. And I think so many families would use it more often, and it would actually be safer because there'd be more traffic on it for people going out jogging on their own and that. So we felt it would be, and we wondered too if there was money out there for it, Rails to Trails, or, getting the community involved more. So Bonnie's been working on this a long time, and there's many people behind the scenes that would love to see it happen or just to be considered. So we thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did we have a snowmobile?
Yes,
person?
Jerry,
Awesome.
come on up. And we do, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, ladies and gentlemen. In 1998, snowmobilers were asking permission
to put in a snowmobile trail along the railroad grade. In 2004, we had the Eisenbahn Trail. Who paid for this trail? There were federal dollars, state dollars, donations, snowmobile grant monies, and county money. Snowmobile grant monies. What is this? Grant monies from the snowmobile program are dollars that are taken out of our registration fees to pay for a project. Seeing that our dollars were taken, snowmobilers have a vested interest in this trail. From the very beginning, we've been involved. We've done work with the county. We brushed the trail out in fall from the summer growth so that it's usable, and it carries over the next season. Let's not forget, this is a multi-use trail. By paving it, you would exclude many of the winter sports. Hikers and dog walkers don't like pavement. It gets too hot. Not all cyclists like pavement. And the skiers, the ATVers, the UTVers, the dog sledders, and snowmobiles don't like pavement either. By paving this trail, snowmobilers and others will suffer significant loss of use. The same scenario occurred in Waukesha County on the Bugline Trail. A compromise was reached and they paved half the trail in the center, left the edges gravel. I don't think that's acceptable even for us as the winter sports enthusiasts. If the trail were paved, it can't be plowed. Only snowmobile groomer would be allowed on it in winter. No other vehicular traffic except for the ATVs, UTVs. Snowmobiles and dog sledders and the other users would not be responsible for damage to the surface of the trail, knowing that we have the right to use the trail. And no rules can or restricting snowmobilers can be made after the project is done. No snowmobile fund should be used for paving or maintaining the asphalt portion of the trail. On many of the funded trails that have been turned into paved trails, you can't get grant money for a certain amount of time, 7 or 10 years, whatever, to maintain the trail. If the asphalt falls into disrepair and is to be abandoned like it has been on some trails, they grind it up and they leave the black gravel. Well, that is not conducive for the winter sports people either, because the black gravel melts off very quickly. The trail has served the users, all the users, well for 20 years. Let's not ruin it for winter sports users for the next 20 years by paving any portion of the trail. And this is talking for skiers, snowshoers, the dog sledders, and there's a couple of them up by Eden that come down, and snowmobilers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I'd like to reiterate that this is what we're doing is we're investigating. There is nothing on the agenda or any future agenda. So it's not really so much a for or against. It's just an informational session. So I think you bring valuable information. Both sides do on what they'd like to see, and certainly those things will be taken into advisement. But for now, is there anybody else that we need to have speak?
Mic on? Thank you. I'm not sure, but I do want to point out both for our presenter as well as to those in the audience that we do have both the City of West Bend represented here today with their Parks Director, Mike, and I'm going to mess up his last name, Yen. That's close. And then we have the village president of the Village of Kewaskum here today with Buzz Martin. I know they've been interested in the downtown portion of the Village of Kewaskum. So I'm pointing that out both for the presenter. Are either of you interested in making any comments?
I can answer questions if you need or anything. I'm here more as an advisor.
Okay. Okay.
Very good. And I thank you, you guys for showing up and being here and taking interest in this. And as well as I'd like to point out, we have a couple of supervisors, Supervisor Troutner and Supervisor Botzert, who also, their jurisdictions are within the Eisenbaum Trail. And I thank you guys for showing up for this discussion. What's that?
Who's the person on the screen?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Yep.
Post haste. Okay, so if you'll introduce our next guest, Jamie, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So we have Melissa Van Lund here with us today from the DNR. And so she is their resident expert on trails and projects like this. And so she's going to provide us with some general information about our trail that she's looked into. So I will turn it over to her, and please feel free to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Jamie. Thank you all. Thanks for having me this afternoon. I've never been referred to as an expert more in one meeting, so thank you for having me. And I'll do my best to give you all some background information. So first, just let me share a little bit about some of my background so you know where that expertise comes from. I've been with the department for just about 15 years, and I've been in the role of Recreation Partnership Section Chief since 2017. And so a large part of my role is working with municipalities and our cooperative partners, recreation partners, youth partners all across the state. So I am based out of Madison, but I travel quite often and work again with countless partners all across the state on various outdoor recreation issues and projects, including trail development and planning. So a little bit more about the Eisenbahn, and if you try to dig into some of the history, documentation is spotty at best for Washington County, so which is kind of interesting. We do have an MOU and an easement that is in place, which is great. The MOU does not have an expiration date, but was done, I believe one was done in 2004, one was done in 2006. And so one of the elements of that MOU and the easement in general call for a plan of use for the trail within 2 years of the MOU. And so I don't know that that has ever been done. In our records, it has not been done. So I'm not sure if it was part of an overall comprehensive outdoor rec plan for the county or otherwise. We do have one on record and another one started for Fond du Lac County and I believe for West Bend, but not necessarily for the county itself for the Eisenbahn. So I'll come back to that in a second, but, and why that's important. So when we look at, trail use in general, obviously the trail uses that you have for the Eisenbahn in the county right now, are outlined essentially in the MOU, but it also does say in there uses, as applicable for the area. So it leaves it pretty general. So I would say overall you're pretty consistent with the MOU, but not necessarily with the part of it with having a plan of use. And so when we look at the potential for paving, there's a number of things to consider. You do consider overall use and what's relevant in the community and, keeping pace with the needs of your communities. And in this case, the connection essentially between West Bend and Kewaskum. But you also need to look at overall existing and established use, and that's a bit where the snowmobile trail comes in. It's not to say that paved trails don't have snowmobile use, because they certainly do. That does exist across Wisconsin. That's very prominent in the state of Minnesota as well. And there can certainly be elements that are included within the trail to be able to accommodate winter uses. So how this kind of all wraps together is that essentially, our opinion would be that if you were to embark on the potential of paving this segment, It's not required in the MOU, but it would probably warrant a planning process. And that would be, again, a public process. And the MOU does also call for a public process related to the trail use. One option there, again, it does call for the responsibility with assistance from the DNR as part of the county's responsibilities in the MOU. But we are embarking on an ecological landscape master plan for this area in 2026. And so if it were to be something that the county would like, we could amend the MOU and you could turn that responsibility for planning over to the department. So we're certainly not asking for that, but if that's something you wanted to discuss in the future, you certainly could. So I think a planning process would definitely be one of the opportunities here, and again, another way to really formally seek public input. So that's something to take into consideration before the paving process. I think another thing to take into consideration is it's been a while since I've been to this portion of the trail, and unfortunately I couldn't get there before this meeting. But when we talk about paving an existing snowmobile route, again, it can certainly be done, but there are things to take into consideration. One being how many crossings you have, meaning how many times does the snowmobile on the trail have to stop in order to cross other roadways or driveways. And the reason that's important is because it's the stopping and starting, the deceleration and acceleration of the snowmobiles that can make damage on the pavement. So it works well and it's okay where, you have long stretches of pavement because you're not stopping and starting. But if you have a lot of roadways and things like that, that could be increased maintenance costs in the future. But it also might be something which you see in northern Wisconsin all the time, those approaches to road crossings are often done in concrete instead of asphalt, and they're painted white. That way they can maintain adequate temperatures for snowmobiling, and they don't have as much wear and tear to the snowmobile starting and stopping at those intersections. So those are a couple things to consider. I would agree, it does have, I would say, minimal impacts to the front end and back end of snowmobile seasons. Obviously, we know with just general science that darker objects heat up faster, right? So when you're talking about pavement, it may take a little bit longer for that segment of trail to be open that is paved because it takes 6 inches of compacted snow to open a snowmobile trail. And with the pavement, snow is more likely to melt on that, especially at the beginning of season and end of season. So in some cases across the state, if we're looking at trickles of snow in order to get a snowmobile trail, that might take a few days longer on the front end and might end a few days earlier on the back end. So those are, again, a couple things to consider. But I think other things to consider are certainly use and established use. And so other communities, as part of their planning process, have definitely gone through use studies on the trail, where you look at how many bicyclists and pedestrians are using the trail to warrant the paving of it versus snowmobile and other winter use. And so that's why both the existing uses, allowable uses, and established use are two important discussions. We're actually going through this process and have gone through the planning process and are working with the city of Verona in Dane County. And we had a mile of trail going through the city of Verona that was not well established for snowmobile use, even though it was an allowable use. And we actually went through the planning process and are working towards paving that one segment of trail through the city of Verona, which will then, the snowmobile use will move out 1 mile to a different trailhead. And so part of that was because the miles per hour going through the city of Verona were very low. Use of the trailhead was very low, and it was not a north-south connection. And so the existing use was there, but the established use was not. And so we felt, the city of Verona and the department felt that the safe routes to school, the populations, and the summer use, and the relevancy of that summer use was more established than the winter use. And so we went through the planning process and established that. I think the last thing to consider is certainly the upfront development costs and maintenance. Obviously, the upfront development costs can be considerable depending on the width of the trail. You know, a 12-foot wide trail for paving can run about $500,000 per mile. So depending on the number of miles that you're considering, you know, price continues to go up. So that's something to certainly consider. Short-term maintenance will be minimal on the front end, but obviously, you know, it takes crack filling and sealing and things like that, as your road departments largely know, over time in order to maintain that trail as an asphalt trail. And one last thing I'll just share is that generally we see, especially with more remote communities that aren't in like heavily urban areas, you generally see 1 to 1.5 miles of use outside of the city limits. And so I know there's only about 5 or so miles in between the two communities. So if you're going about a mile from each community, that's generally where your primary use, that more than 60% of use, is going to be. So you have to kind of ask yourself, like, how many people will go between as far as a pedestrian? For biking use, that will go further, but for average evening dog walking or going out after dinner for a walk, that's about 1 mile to 1.5 miles outside the city on either direction. So I'll pause there. I know that was a lot of information to dump on all of you, and see what questions you might have.
Okay, do we have any questions for our guest?
Yeah, I guess I've got lots of questions. The design on this, and there was nothing in the packet regarding this, at least that I could find. I guess I'm a little caught unaware as to the discussion on this. Obviously, the snowmobilers want to have non-paved, so the snow will stay longer. The walkers and the bikers want to have it paved so it's more comfortable on their feet for walking and in general. And I guess I'm not real clear, is this trail currently open to motorized vehicles? I mean, ATVs, can they use this now?
In winter.
In winter. Are there restrictions on that during the summertime? There's a whole bunch of stuff I think that we don't have here in terms of information. It's 12 feet wide. What other options would there be? Could you go 6 feet of paved, 6 feet of gravel? I have no idea. But there's just a whole bunch of stuff that we don't have here today for information. I guess I'm not sure what are we expected to determine today.
Right. Well, I'll take that, actually. We're not determining anything, to be quite honest. I mean, really, what we're here is kind of asking some of the preliminary questions. So what we're trying to look at is just if we had such desire in the future to do anything, what are some of the problems that we might face? And I think we got a pretty clear idea that certainly snowmobile usage and snow melt, those types of things. This is really more just an information gathering type meeting rather than kind of a organizing or trying to actually do something, as far as the trail goes. As I stated in the beginning, we're not taking action and we're not discussing taking action. We're merely gathering information at this meeting. So I know we're not going to get all the questions answered that you might have, and it certainly, if we move forward on this, we would be, going through a lot of that. But right now, seeing as there's no plan, we're just trying to get the 30,000-foot view of what we would be facing.
Okay, and if we're going to have a plan, what group or organization is going to bring this plan to us, and at what stage of development will it be, and at what kind of production costs? Maintenance costs, obviously, as you say, you got gravel down there. Yeah, weeds are going to grow up in that summertime. Pavement, you don't have it. Who's bringing this forward to us?
Is my mic on? Thank you. Just to clarify, I think what the committee should stay focused on the big picture of, is paving this trail something? That's the policy question, right? To do or not to do, looking at all of the factors and the costs. And as we kind of collect that information, we certainly know we would have a lot of work to do, right, to go back and come. But at this point, we are not working on this, right? We have not started working on this. We understand it's a big undertaking, whether that's planning or options or cost or maintenance costs. And so we are here today because there's been interest in starting that process. But absent the elected officials' will to do anything, we will not be, right? So we're trying to just gauge at a high level, what questions might you have, if you have any, and in this case, she's here today to provide information about, I think, the process, maybe what it would take, any other questions that you have. But all of those things would definitely need to be steps, but we're not there. We are not taking any steps towards figuring it out because we're not sure it's something that we're interested in doing. So I think that's kind of what brought us here today, to hear about it, if that helps at all.
So this is very preliminary.
Very preliminary.
It's pre-preliminary, to be quite honest.
Why this is
I mean,
such a topic of discussion.
quite honestly, your questions that you just asked were actually perfect because those are the questions that are going to be relevant, and that's what this meeting is about. We don't even know what questions we're asking. You just pointed out a whole slew of them, and those are the things that need to be considered for, any idea that we might take this up. So, like I said, without getting too far into the weeds and trying to even answer those questions, you just made us aware of several questions that will need to be brought up.
So this is strictly exploratory.
Strictly exploratory. That's what we're trying to do here. Yeah, and I apologize. It's sort of a different thing here. We have several community people, as I pointed out in the beginning, and I'd just like to state that we're finding this out as you are finding this out. So we are all learning together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So now, hopefully, and my hope for this, and I certainly think Jamie's and certainly county executives, is that we're all going to be on the same page. We can take away from this meeting some of the tasks that we would have to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's the public interest or not. So Jamie.
Yes, and I would like to add that this came to the attention of the county executive at one of his listening sessions that, there are members of the community that want to see this happen. And so rather than just continuing to say, well, trying to provide some actual conversation that would be helpful. If you don't mind, if I ask a question of Missy, one of the things that you mentioned was that you would see that before this could happen, there would need to be a planning process, and that the state is already planning a planning process. And when we spoke, you mentioned a master plan for the Eisenbahn not existing, and we talked about that related to wayfinding signage or some of the other things that the fate of this trail might hold. Can you elaborate at all on that and what it is that successful trails in the state have or have done, or what the opportunities for that might be?
As far as the planning process you're talking? Yeah. So, again, right now the MOU that we have with the county indicates that the planning responsibility is the county's. And so a planning process, I would think, would need to be done either way when you're talking about this kind of development for the trail. And so a planning document, you're the planning committee, so that's the guiding principle and gives the overarching authority of what you can or cannot do. And so really what that does, we have a lot of cooperative trails across the state. I want to say 27, and there's a mixed bag of responsibility. So some of our agreements indicate that the county or municipal partner is the planner and has the planning responsibility. Some indicate that the department is. And quite honestly, some of these agreements were done in the 70s and they don't say either. And so, so you have an opportunity here, I think. This would warrant a planning process. This could be further consultation with your corp counsel on that as in regards to the MOU, but I think a planning process would be warranted to explore this and other use options and give that, again, guiding, overarching authority for how the trail is fully developed, maintained, and enhanced throughout the years. And so a lot of things that are included in a trail plan like this, would be that wayfinding element. It would be land management, historical and cultural resources, environmental species and resource analysis, use analysis, all of that kind of stuff goes into a linear trail like this. You have a complicating factor here in that we have essentially 3 agreements sitting out there for the entirety of this trail with West Bend, Fond du Lac County, and Washington County. And so that means 3 different agreements with 3 different authorities and 3 different authorities over planning. And so what we would love to have happen would be that the uses would be consistent and that the plan for maintenance and development would be consistent across all three partners here. But there is an opportunity because we are embarking on our ecological landscape planning. While it's not in our authority to plan the Eisenbahn, through amended agreements, you could give that authority back to us if we wanted to amend that agreement. So even though we have our ecological landscape plan coming up, the Eisenbahn would be mentioned in that, and it would be mentioned as that it's a cooperative trail and that the planning responsibility is of the partner, and that's really the extent that it would be mentioned in our master plan. Again, however, if the municipalities wanted us to do the plan, we could amend those agreements and take over the planning, meaning we would work with you and with all of your constituents to do that plan similar to NR 44, which is our guiding statute for master planning.
Okay. So I'm not necessarily doing public comment, but I have the chairman, is it?
President of the village.
President. Okay, so the village president of Kewaskum, Fuzz Martin, I'd like to recognize you to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to state that we recently had a pretty extensive downtown redevelopment plan put together for the village of Kewaskum. And our constituents had overwhelmingly, as part of the feedback that we had received, asked for paving of the Eisenbahn through the village itself, at least in the downtown area, had been one of the requests. People like the paved area in West Bend and how that gets used, and the businesses and residents in the area thought that they would use it more if it was paved through that area for those recreational purposes. So just wanted to state that had been addressed in our recent, as of this year, it was adopted at our downtown redevelopment plan, and so that's been, I guess, ratified. So,
very good. Is there an MOU with Kewaskum?
No.
So literally, now you would have to develop an MOU. I don't know if the county or with the DNR, depends on which way that goes. So you're up against it too.
Yeah, we said we'd have to work with the county and the DNR. We know that we're just the village, and we're kind of at the mercy of all of you. But our residents would like to see it. So if whatever way this plan comes together would be something that we'd heavily be in favor of. So
yeah,
thank you.
I mean, we're all kind of basically spitballing here. I mean, that's what this session is about, to try and just. I understand there's people on the pro side, the con side, whatnot, but again, it's about getting the information. So to our guest, let me ask you this: the planning that you had kind of briefly spoke of for 2026 with the DNR, their master plan. Can you give me a little more information on how the Eisenbahn would be involved in that, or what kind of material would be discussed?
So as of right now, because the planning responsibility is with our partners, it would be mentioned in our plan, but we would not do the planning for it. If you wanted us to do the planning for it, then we would have to amend or write a new MOU between DNR and the county to allow for us to do that. Because right now the MOU gives the responsibility to the county. So our plan, and I could maybe send Jamie some other examples, but with our cooperative plans where we've done planning, again, it mentions that it exists. It's a state-owned property, gives basic information about it, but we do not plan for it in our plan if we do not have the authority. So I think, again.
Sorry to
like you
interrupt
stated,
there, but
this is
can you
pre-
elaborate?
pre-
What is an
pre-
ecological
I actually
plan?
had someone on my team today ask me a question about it, and I said, this is pre. There's nothing to know as of yet. But I think that a lot of the questions you have are natural for a trail planning process. And so I think whether at some point, whether it's Kewaskum or other communities, or even, discussions with Fond du Lac County and City of West Bend, a consistent planning process either among the municipalities or having the DNR do it for all the municipalities and take over the planning would be warranted as we go forward. Again, even Fond du Lac's plan, I think they were starting to redevelop it in 2016, and I'm just not sure if it was redone, but their other one before that was done in 2010. So we're certainly due on all fronts for new overall master plans for the trail. And again, I think having constituents be supportive of paving or not supportive of paving is way down the road. The planning process really needs to be the next action item out of the gate before even any of that is really discussed. And again, the planning process would work to vet all of those things and take public input on all of those things, whether the municipalities conduct that planning process or the DNR conducts that planning process. That public input and element would all be part of that.
Okay, the chair would recognize Jamie Ludwig. You had a question?
Yes. Could you elaborate for those of us who may not know what an ecological plan is that you're doing in our community?
Sure. So we used to master plan property by property, and we have hundreds and hundreds of properties. Well, as you can imagine, what that meant was that by the time we got through every property, some of these master plans, if they exist, are 25, 30, 40 years old. And a master plan should not really, to remain relevant to the environment, to the natural resource, and to the community that uses it, a master plan should really not be any more than about 15 years old, give or take. And so a few years ago, the Natural Resources Board voted to plan by ecological landscape instead of by individual property. So what it means is that we divided out the state into landscapes, ecological landscapes that are similar, and then we plan for all the properties within that landscape. And so the Eisenbahn, if the department, if you wanted to give that authority back to the department for the particular ecological landscape that this trail falls in, there are countless other state-owned properties that we'd be planning for all at the same time. And if you just give me a second, I can bring it up on my other screen here just so I can speak a little bit more intelligently to the actual plan. But again, that one will start, for us, we will start it in late 2025 internally, and it will be the public process element will start in 2025. So this ecological landscape that this falls in is called Southeast Glacial Plains. And it's about 15 counties that are encompassed within that ecological landscape plan. And if I'm guessing right, because the counties aren't labeled, it goes essentially from Fond du Lac County all the way down to the Illinois border. And it's kind of a skinny strip. So there's a strip along Lake Michigan, and then there's a strip directly to the west. And again, it goes from about Fond du Lac County to the county line, and then it also includes Dane County over to Waukesha County. So it's about that wide. So about 3 counties wide and about 5 counties high, approximately. So it's a big ecological landscape.
Okay. Chair recognizes Carol Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I get back to preliminary thoughts on this thing. Who has jurisdiction / control / authority over the Eisenbaum Trail now?
The county.
Well, the department has the ownership, but essentially the county has the authority.
All right, but we're also including the city of West Bend, the village of Kewaskum, Fond du Lac County, Washington County. There, it seems to me like there's a whole lot of entities need to be involved with this MOU.
So
And
there's
the
actually
DNR.
3 MOUs. So the city of West Bend is responsible for the segments that go through the city of West Bend. Washington County is responsible for essentially right outside West Bend, north to the county line. And then Fond du Lac County is responsible for the segment in Fond du Lac County. And they're all separate and distinct. So if you were to do a plan, you could only plan for the portion that the county manages outside of West Bend, north to the county line. That's the only segment that Washington County is responsible for.
Where does Kewaskum come into this?
There's no agreement with Kewaskum, so the portions that go through Kewaskum are managed by Washington County.
Okay. Thank you.
And if that were to change, what would happen is essentially the village of Kewaskum would need to have an agreement with the county, because essentially the DNR gave the authority to the county, and then the county would have to give the authority to Kewaskum, or we would have to amend our MOU with Washington County to take Kewaskum out of it, and then the DNR would have a separate agreement with Kewaskum.
So did you get all that, Fuzz? All right. The chair would like to recognize Chairman Schleif.
I have a couple questions. I'm glad we have someone from West Bend here. Did West Bend pay for the paving originally, or with your permission, Mr. Chair, can you answer a question?
Good question. So 2007, when we did the paving through West Bend, the entire project was about $700,000. Of that, don't quote me on these exact numbers, it's been since 2007. Of that $700,000, I believe we had a CMAQ grant or a DOT grant for about $550,000 of that work. The remainder of the money was tax dollars, TIF funds, and donations for the remainder of the project. With our $700,000 project, about $500,000 of that was asphalt, gravel and asphalt work for the trail. The remaining $200,000 was grading and landscaping in some of our more urban sections, like our downtown, where the museum is, River Shores Development, things like that. So the $700,000 project, it wasn't gravel and asphalt, it was gravel, asphalt, grading, some landscaping, things like that. So.
And so does the MOU include you doing maintenance on that?
So basically, the general rule, and it gets very convoluted. It's a state trail managed by the county and the city of West Bend. All that. I get that. I go through the same story many times a year. I do, because who's responsible for what? General rule of thumb is the improvements that the city of West Bend did to the trail, we are responsible for. We're responsible for that maintenance. We asphalted it. We got a crack seal. We have to seal. We did the landscaping that I'd mentioned. We have many turf areas in the downtown area. We maintain all of that. The county does not. Seems somewhat simple, but the traffic signs that are on the trail, yield ahead, stop signs, all that, that's actually the responsibility of the county, because that's part of the trail. Gravel or asphalt, our improvements are not, etc. That was there because the county came in, county did their improvements to the trail. County said we're done. We did our MOU at the county, and because the city of West Bend wanted more improvements, our improvements we then maintain. We're responsible for them.
Thank you. That's very informative. Then when I look at some of the information we got, it talks about cost for paving and shouldering, and there's a 40,000 foot and a 31,300 foot estimate. I would guess that the 31,300 goes from Barton through Kewaskum, and the 40,000 goes all the way to the county line. That's correct? Okay.
Are you jumping the route on me here, Chairman?
We haven't presented that yet.
Oh, sorry. It's part of the information.
Just giving you.
But, yeah, obviously then, whatever gets paved has to have an MOU on who's going to take care of it, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I will add that it's been pointed out that the county has some maintenance responsibilities with regards to this trail at present, and things like wayfinding signage do appear in our 2050 plan, right? So as we start talking about the responsibility of forget asphalt, right? Just planning for this trail and cooperating and being, a good steward of that. I do think that there is the timing of this conversation is helpful in terms of just a lot of what is being said. We are unaware of. And so it's helpful so I just wanted to add that there are other pieces of the maintenance of the Eisenbahn Trail that need to be considered.
And we already learned that the snowmobile trail people kind of take care of brush too at some point in the year, so. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more, before we move on with the engineer's estimate, do we have any more questions for our guest? So DNR wise. What's that?
I have one for the DNR.
Okay, let's first defer to Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since I'm not sure which stakeholder is the big driver or catalyst in some of these changes, but obviously the village of Kewaskum is a large enough segment of this. And if they do have a desire for downtown improvements like this, would it be something, since the county has authority in that area right now, that those improvements would happen underneath our MOU or our authority, or is that something that we would be better off seceding that back to the DNR direct to Kewaskum?
I think you could do it either way. If right now it would have to be done under the county's authority because you have authority over maintenance and development of that portion of the trail within the county. So if you wanted us to have an agreement directly with the village of Kewaskum, we would also have to redo our MOU with Washington County as well, to remove that responsibility from your MOU. So you could do something, we could either be a third party to it, or you could do that through just Washington County and Kewaskum. So there are options there, certainly. If it's more of just a maintenance element, it could be an agreement between Kewaskum and the county. If it's more of an overall authority element where you're like, we want to take this segment out of our authority completely, then it would be best for us to redevelop our MOU with the county and develop a portion of a new MOU with Kewaskum.
Okay. Jamie, do you want to present on the engineer's estimate?
Sure. So then lastly, I just want to point out, we did have the highway department prepare an estimate at a very, very, very high level. It does not, you'll notice there's a footnote about what it does not include. And certainly there were some engineering, tree trimming, base materials, kind of the grading work. We did not design this. Again, we were looking just at very high level to give a ballpark of what something like this might cost. You did hear the city of West Bend talk about how their portion of the trail was funded, so there are funding streams out there. But again, at this point, I don't know that we're near making a decision, but just wanting to kind of give an idea of the magnitude that when we talk about, what something like this costs. It obviously competes with other funding streams or other priorities, both in terms of project management as well as the physical cost for doing so. So happy to answer any questions. I would use this just as a very high level, here's kind of an idea of what something like this might cost. And we would not use these numbers in the future, really, other than they're just to give an idea of interest level, before we make any decisions, what we're talking about.
Okay. And to kind of share these costs, we have a 40,000 foot distance up for $2,080,000. Which segment was that?
That would be north of the existing pavement to the county line.
Okay. So then the other one would be basically what a lot of people are kind of talking about here is the 31,300 foot segment, which would be about $1.627 million.
Are we using the same number? I see 280,000, not 2,080,000.
That's the
okay, all different art.
yeah,
Different columns.
yeah, different.
The
So
numbers are similar.
yeah, total cost paving with shoulder for each segment on the bottom. So So basically, that's what you're up against is several $1 million in costs associated, and there's possibilities that there could be grants and things like that. Those are things we try to look at when we figure out these things or when we look at these things. But with that, you also have to figure in usage. How much is currently being used between West Bend and Kewaskum, that for the warranting of asphalt, and how much is being used during the wintertime, how many snowmobiles are on it. Those are things that we would have people out there that would take numbers on that and stuff as well. So anything else you wish to present? I'm sorry. Yes, Supervisor Bossert had a question.
Yeah, a couple of questions, actually. First one is, are there other snowmobile routes right now and snowmobile trails in that part of the county? Or is that area devoid of other snowmobile trails? And I'm thinking that's a question for Ms. Ludovic.
I'm going to punt, see if maybe Missy has a better answer for that. Not that I'm aware of.
I don't have a better answer from that, but I can tell you that
is it no?
You cannot duplicate snowmobile miles, meaning there can't be a trail adjacent to this one that can also get reimbursed. So I'm going to guess that this is probably a north-south connection, even just without looking. I'm going to guess that the Eisenbahn is probably a north-south connection to east-west routes, but I would have to look at the county snowmobile map to see that, so I'm not sure.
Actually, he can tell you, and you can answer. I don't want to have public comment.
Okay, so just to repeat that, the Eisenbahn is set up as a connector, so a lot of the snowmobile trails flow in and out of it, and it's a main connector of the county.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a comment made by the gentleman with the snowmobile club that if improvements are made, then at that point rules are essentially frozen and we would not be able to create new rules for the trail. I'm not sure I'm totally understanding that right, so if I'm misstating that, I'm open to corrections, but is that correct or not? Or, do we still have rulemaking authority over this trail?
We do have authority over the trail. I think what he's referring to is that should we come up with a compromise of an agreement, that we would honor that.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, and of course that's the basics with the compromise. That if we agree that this is something that will work for everybody, we're going to honor that for a set period of time until, maybe 20, 25 years down the road, needs may change and we may need to revisit that. So, yeah, okay. If we did pave it, we would not exclude snowmobiles from the trail, correct?
I think you have to determine that through the planning process, but you would not. That would not, by the act of paving it, would not disclude snowmobile use. There would be minor impacts to snowmobile use, but it would not displace snowmobile use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Troutner?
I just had a question about the public process. You said that the DNR could do that, or else the county could. What kind of cost is with that? And if the DNR does that, does the county have to pay the DNR? Or?
If the county would like the DNR to do the planning process, again, we would just have to update our MOU and do a new MOU to determine that, and there would be no cost from the department for us to do that, to do the planning.
Okay, thank you.
If we were to do that, the timing would be such that if the county were interested in that, we would want to determine that in the next 6 months or so. So that would be the time frame, because we would want to have that updated agreement executed in time for us to include this portion of the Eisenbahn in our ecological landscape, which again internally would start in late 2025, but public-wise would start in 2026. Just off to the side, we would also want to have discussions with Fond du Lac County and West Bend about their interest in having us plan those portions. Their interest or non-interest would not impact it. So if Washington County was interested in having the DNR plan this portion, if Fond du Lac and West Bend were not interested in having the department, we could still move forward with planning this portion.
Okay, any final from our elected officials? Any other questions or anything here? Supervisor Krebs.
I guess I would say it would start to help if this committee understands our true responsibilities to this trail. I don't think I've ever stepped foot on this trail, honestly, so I don't know a whole lot about it. I think it would be helpful to go back and just start to review the historical aspects of it, actually get a copy of the MOU, see what we have for historical data relevant to it. If there's surveys, existing maps, see what other maps that either the city of West Bend has, the snowmobile maps, how they really all start to lay together and impact in there and stuff. After that, I think would then be wise. We would be better informed to really start to get a good idea of where to steer this discussion towards, or figure out what our next steps really would be at that point. And I think then we would be wise to, whether we do it, DNR does it, however, or cooperation of the two. I'm sure we should update our maps, our comprehensive plans to include this, because that's probably a component of the MOU. So that's what I think the next step should be. So.
Okay. Thank you. And again, I'd just like to reiterate that this is strictly an informational. We're not looking to push any plans or anything like that. This was just to kind of get a high-level view of what would all be involved in this process. It does not signify that we're interested in doing it or anything else. So I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. This was strictly so that we can all kind of understand what the process would look like, or what we would be up against as far as state and costs and memorandums of understanding, all the different things that are involved in it. So with that, and seeing no further questions, I guess we'll consider this meeting closed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and aside,